5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hello and welcome back to Tennis Unfiltered with me, James Gray of iNews.co.uk and the i newspaper. Coming into your feeds unusually on a Friday this week. I have to take some blame for that. Well, I don't know if I can take all the blame. Australia's a very long way away. Yeah, George also deserves a little bit of it. But in fairness, I have been on a flight for the last 30 hours and have almost recovered. I mean, my journey was quite bad because I think I had China's worst pilot flying from Melbourne to Shanghai. This is a really niche thing, right? And it's a real bugbear of mine. But when you get clean air turbulence, right, you're supposed to change altitude. You're like, okay, well, there's some turbulence here. Like, let's go up 500 feet or 1,000 feet. And it took this guy 2 hours to realize that maybe changing altitude would solve this turbulence issue that we were having.
Were you tracking it on your little monitor, James?
Yeah, it's exactly what I was doing. Yeah. I was like, sorry, excuse me, I've just got a few pointers for the pilot.
Like backseat driving for the pilot. That's absolutely wonderful.
Can I go and mansplain this, please? I don't think he's at the right altitude. But yeah, that really impacted my first flight. And then my second flight, I had a middle seat for a 13-hour schlep from Shanghai. Calvin, you've just driven from Nottingham to Barnsley, which I assume was a similar kind of ordeal.
Yeah, I got a similar story about flying, actually. Well, it's not a similar story, but it's just reminded me of when Luke and I flew to Portugal just after COVID. And it was, I can't remember, it was maybe a Ryanair flight, but it had a Portuguese pilot. And the flight was fine. And then he announced, about 10 minutes before landing, he came on the tannoy and announced that everyone will be happy to know that we're actually currently on schedule to break the all-time record for a flight between London and Lisbon. So fingers crossed, let's see if we can do it. And I'm not kidding, right? He went bouncing down the runway. And I thought we were going to go straight into the airport, departure lounge. He was definitely...
But did he do it?
We beat it by apparently 32 seconds.
Huge.
So
Congratulations.
Should be in the Guinness Book of Records, I think.
George, your worst flight?
Worst flight? I think actually it's a tennis-related flight, James. It was on my way home from Britain's infamous defeat to Slovakia in the Fed Cup, as it was then, where they lost 3-1 on indoor clay, which was a first for me to be involved in.
I mean, you clearly didn't go to enough Fed Cup ties because almost all of them were on indoor clay.
Well, no, quite. I didn't do too many, but just it collided with one of those big storms we were having in the UK, and I was sat next to I was on my way on my own back, kind of by the window seat. I was sat next to a couple. And it was one of those flights where just someone puts their hand on your hand and is clenching it.
Oh my God.
Tight. We tried to land about 6 times. It was and all the trains when we got down were cancelled from Stansted because it was so windy. I was quite chill about it, but just having someone grip you during that really hammered home that maybe I shouldn't be as calm about potential aeronautical disasters.
I mean, because where I live, I obviously live in Barnsley, and the nearest airport is actually Leeds Bradford. But I don't know how many people know this, but Leeds Bradford, the pilots have to have a special license to fly into there and out of there because it's the highest airport in the country, and the winds are pretty extreme. And every time I fly, in Europe, and I book my own flights, the lads tend to book my flights for me now, but when I book my own flights, every time I'm on the plane going back into Leeds Bradford, it's terrible, right? It's all over the shop. And then every time I get on the flight, every time I'm on the flight, I'm thinking, there's no way I'm flying into Leeds Bradford again. And then even if it's a week later and I'm booking a flight, I'm like, it's £30 cheaper to fly into Leeds Bradford. So maybe I'm just going to do it. And then every single time I regret it.
£30 for 100% terror.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about terrible flights. But one of the most terrifying airports to fly into in the world is Madeira, where I went last year, because you have to basically, because it's on the side of a volcanic island, the wind really rips round the corner of the volcano. So in order to approach it, you have to take a right angle turn on approach. So, like, you're 30 seconds from landing and the guy banks hard left. It's and similar to Leeds Bradford, you have to have a very specific flying license to actually land there. So, the Cristiano Ronaldo Airport, it may be one of the more amazing airports, but it's not a lot of fun landing.
It feels quite appropriate, the kind of 90-degree turn from his celebration, doesn't it? That he kind of jumps in the air and like lands hard.
Yeah, well,
it's like
every flight, the pilot comes on and just goes, "Shoo!" Right, enough nonsense. We've got
what
loads
a
to get
tangent
through.
that was. Fantastic.
Yes, I apologise to anyone who was like hoping to get straight into the hard tennis. We're going to devote the first half of today's podcast, and it might end up being more than half, to questions, because I know we've been really, really remiss in terms of answering all your questions. We've had loads on email, loads on Twitter. We'll get through as many of them as we can today. But first, we've had a couple of 5-star reviews in the last few days, which I am legally obliged to read out. Thanks to Chow for Now, who just said fun and enjoyable, interesting discussions from over in the US, and one from over here in the UK. Good alternative to the tennis podcast. Enjoyed listening to the AO review show. Found the presenters knowledgeable and interesting. Listen to the right show.
You ducked out for half of it, James? Is that why that happened?
No comment. Said I actually thought the critique of the WTA was fair and constructive. Give this pod a whirl if you're a bit fed up with the groupthink of the tennis podcast, which I think is a bit unfair. From Eskity. Yes, I always say this to people because we once got criticism that we were like snide about the tennis podcast or something. I listened to the tennis podcast. No, it wasn't. And I would encourage everyone to listen to the tennis podcast and this one. I learn a lot from all of them, especially Matt, because he's a massive tennis nerd and it's incredible, his level of knowledge. I mean that term entirely complimentarily as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, we will talk later on about Andy Murray. We'll talk about Emma Raducanu, Heather Watson, not a name I thought I'd be saying this week, Naomi Osaka 2, the Six Kings Slam in Saudi Arabia. Some excellent reporting from Simon Briggs on that this week. We'll also talk about Holger Rune's coaching roundabout and titles for Yelena Ostapenko, Diane Schneider, and Alexander Bublik. But first, we're going to start with a question from Justin Cherney. I think it's Cherney. I apologise if I mispronounced that. On Twitter, we're at Unfiltered Tennis on Twitter. Justin says, thoughts on variety of surfaces and locations for events during weeks like this? ATP, Challengers, WTA Tour, 125s. Does it help bring opportunity and exposure, or does it lack a uniform brand for professional tennis? Something in between, ? Keep up the good work. Calvin, I imagine weeks like, I feel like for your guys, changing surfaces almost week to week is not that unusual, but that must bring challenges as well.
Yeah, it's just a weird time of year at the minute, I think. But because you come from out of the outdoor to some of the tournaments are on indoor and some of them are on outdoor. And then as of the week after next, there's some clay that start coming in, like Rio, that kind of thing.
Cordoba this week in Argentina is on
Cordoba,
clay,
of course, yeah, I forgot about that. That's on clay already. So there are 3 different surfaces going on at the minute. You don't get... That doesn't happen regularly, It's like you'll then get pretty much goes to hard only for like Miami and Indian Wells, and then pretty much clay only up until the grass only. Then there's a couple of clay, but mainly hard until the indoors.
Does it when you're doing scheduling? Do the surface switch make much of a difference, or is it more geography?
I think it depends what it is. It's difficult. Like if you're going from indoor hard to outdoor hard, not loads of difference, because we were actually arguing in Australia actually that the feeling I always think for some reason or another that indoor hard is quicker than outdoor hard, and I always thought it was something to do with the air. There being less air or more air, whatever you're indoors, but there is no scientific background to that. It's just something I always assumed. But it does always feel like indoor hard are faster than outdoor hard if you put the same court surface in indoor and outdoor. But it could just be because like there's no wind and what have you, so the ball strikers, the big servers, are just going to be more clean on the ball and that kind of thing. So swapping between those two isn't a huge problem. Clay becomes more of a problem because it's a completely different surface. Even for doubles, tactics change and that kind of thing. What kind of shots you'll play and what have you. Like maybe not so much for Henry because he'll probably serve and volley on both first and second, whereas Luke will there's a chance on clay court Luke will serve and stay back on both. Certainly on second serve he'll stay back. So that kind of thing happens. But the rankings that they're at, and I guess a lot of other people are at, you kind of a lot of the time you don't have the option. You're going to play what you can get in. So it's kind of one of those. I know that Henry's playing indoor hard this week, and then he's playing outdoor hard next week, and then he's playing clay in Rio, I think.
Oh wow!
So that's 4 tournaments in a row with different surface. So he's going outdoor hard, indoor hard, clay.
I think just to pick up, I was talking to someone about this indoor-outdoor, speed thing, and I think what makes a big difference with indoor courts is what's underneath them, like what they're laid on. So obviously on outdoors, you're basically always laid on, well, give or take cement, whereas indoors you're often laid on like wooden boards or something, underneath the court surface is a different surface. I think that makes quite a big difference.
Well, they're usually temporary. That's the thing. A lot of places, like there's not many some of the places, like at Challengers, they're permanent courts, but even a lot of Challengers in France, they're temporary courts.
I was just trying to think, like, I've not been to Paris-Bercy. You been to Paris-Bercy, George?
I actually haven't. No.
I don't know if that's a permanent tennis facility. I don't think it is actually.
I don't think it is.
That's moving. They're moving the venue of that next year to somewhere a bit closer to Roland Garros.
There are some that are, like Stockholm is at a massive tennis centre.
Yes.
So Stockholm is a permanent. They are permanent courts there.
I mean, from a marketing perspective, George, or from like I know you like talking about the tennis story and the story of tennis trying to tell. I mean, is it problematic the week after Slam that everywhere's a bit different, or actually do departing tennis fans barely notice?
I think unfortunately that's probably the answer. I think people who vaguely follow tennis are probably seeing some headlines occasionally about players they know at certain tournaments, but not really thinking, oh, that's weird, the kind of flicking surface this week. I mean, I think you get a bit more of a kind of media build-up narrative. But, I mean, going back to kind of your original point about the flicks you have between different surfaces, I mean, there is normally a bit of bleed, I would say, between kind of changes of year. So you kind of have some grass overlapping clay quite hard, even into that transition. Is it what's the bloody tournament that happens? Surbiton and stuff that kind of starts happening during the French Open, for example. You have, weird times of year like Gstaad coming in after Wimbledon. I don't think it's probably one of these things that we who kind of watch tennis a lot think more about than people who don't watch it at all. I think most people's consciousness, it's just like, they have this big tournament on clay at one point, they have this big tournament on grass at the other point, and they have these other 2 big tournaments in hard courts at other times of the year, and probably not too much. Do I think it would be better for a narrative? Probably not. I think only if you were to shorten the schedule so much around the whole year that you were really keeping it quite compact and tight, which there's a lot of pros and cons for in terms of, making it easier to follow versus actually giving a wider range of players more opportunities to play. So that's an age-old debate. But I don't think it really matters that much, to be honest, from that perspective.
Well, thanks for your question, Justin, and please keep them coming. Always nice to have questions on Twitter at Unfiltered Tennis. And that's how John Williamson, a regular correspondent, got in touch, who says, after 2 joyful weeks of loads of televised tennis matches, courtesy of a month's UK Discovery subscription, the potential spectre of Sky Sports' thin pickings is appearing over the horizon. Any chance of bluer skies? I know this is a real bugbear of Calvin's. I'm just going to tell you because I know that Sky Sports are launching officially their tennis channel next week, which they say will be available to Sky Sports customers with complete action and arena packages. Viewers will be able to access multiple live court streams at the same time via the Sky Sports mobile app, the Sky TV app, or Red Button, and now bonus streams giving access to more live matches. Is there any music to your ears in there, Calvin?
I mean, from what I put a tweet out last week about it, and a gentleman called Lee on Twitter, who I think maybe does some work in TV. He runs the Tennis on TV account, I think. He told me that
invaluable resources it is, by the way. Yeah.
He told me that the word is that Sky are going to have, I think it's from either next week or the week after, they're going to have every single tournament on with multiple court options apart from things like 250 doubles, which isn't offered for some weird reason. That the ATP sold the rights to 250 doubles separately from everything else to local broadcasters, and I've never seen any local broadcaster have 250 doubles on, other than maybe Australia. I think sometimes do it, So if that is correct, if they are going to have on Red Button every single tournament with every single match on, I mean, I know some people say they're not going to have match replays, but, you know, that's kind of fair enough. I'd kind of accept that if they're going to have every court, but I don't want to take a step back from what they had on Amazon. I mean, Amazon didn't have every tournament, to be fair. They had most of them. And I think that I'd like to get at least what Amazon had. And for me, obviously, I want to make sure that in the 500s and the thousands that they're going to have the doubles, and in the slams. I mean, in the slams they do anyway, but so I guess it's a wait and see thing. If it's what they said, it's going to be excellent, I think. Although it's still obviously going to be a lot more expensive than what Amazon is. But, you know, as long as we're getting the same, what I think is a problem is if we're getting less and paying a whole lot more.
Yeah, and that is, you know, I funnily enough, I spoke to Dan Evans about this in Australia, and I said, oh, you know, don't you think it's a bit much, you know, to be paying X amount of money? And he kind of took the same view that Calvin, I remember you had when the deal first got announced, which is like, well, it's on Sky, people are more likely to just happen upon it, and it's much easier just to stick the telly on. And ever said, oh, I'm just used to sticking the telly on and typing in 401 or 501 on Virgin or whatever it is, and just watching whatever's on there. And I thought that was a good point. And funnily enough, I've got back today, and having had 10 days of holiday in Australia, I actually wanted to watch some tennis, so just stuck it on, and there it was. And I'm watching Lehechka against Rinderknecht just now, which is actually a pretty good little matchup. But anyway, so I'd understand the frustration of people who are like, well, I want to watch this specific match, but in a week like this, you know, where there's a tournament in Cordoba, a tournament in Dallas, a tournament in Marseille, a tournament in Abu Dhabi, a tournament in Cluj, like it, I think we were spoiled by Amazon, like in that they had comprehensive coverage because, you know, they must have thrown a lot of money at it, and Amazon have a lot of money, and tennis was a big loss leader, and it wasn't a long-term project for them. Like, they were never going to take, unless tennis rights had gone, you know, unless they had picked up millions of subscriptions directly as a result of tennis, they were never going to show tennis for more than 5 or 10 years. Like, it's not their strategy to have long-term commitments to certain sports. They want to go into a sport, get all the fans to buy Amazon Prime, and then drop the sport again and hope that those people realize Amazon Prime is a good thing to have. And Sky is a similar model, but it's a bigger commitment because it's a sort of telecoms company. So I think it was kind of inevitable that we were going to get to this situation. And maybe this is, as you say, Calvin, as good as we deserve, if it comes to pass as we think it might.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think that I don't think Amazon went above and beyond when you consider other sports, like other sports in countries other than Britain. Like, for example, if you're on any day that there's Premier League fixtures on around the world, you can watch whichever Premier League fixture you want to watch via streaming and that kind of thing. In America, you certainly can. In any country, you can. I know you can. And the same with, for example, NBA and that kind of thing. That if you have an NBA pass, which is only £10 a month, or $10 a month, I think, in America, the league pass, you can watch any match that you want to watch on that. But I do think that if tennis, you know, we're coming from behind as well, so we have to offer extra stuff. Some smirking going on in here in this podcast. Like,
James
really,
set me off there.
Really frowned upon behaviour. Like, wouldn't happen on the tennis podcast, this type of thing. No, I think, you know, it's like we're going to have to offer something that's a bit different from the other sports. You know, it can't just be we're going to have one tennis match on and then, you know, maybe a couple on Red Button. It's going to have to be like, and I don't know the real ins and outs of the technology of it, but everything is there. Like, the world feed is there, you know, so it's not like they're sending cameras to each new place. They everywhere has, every single court that there's a match on every single court there's a match on in ATP or Challenger events and WTA has a camera that is functioning and streaming somewhere. So it's a case of just putting it on. And you would think it's not that difficult to do that. You know, it's like if ATP Challenger TV can have 20 matches running at a time, you'd imagine Sky Sports can do something. Or even if they don't have it on the telly, like maybe have it on the app or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? And I don't know. I haven't spoken. Like I usually would have tried to go out of my way and speak to some people, but I have actually been trying to take some holiday in the last 10 days. So I haven't, and I've also been on a plane. But I think there probably is an element, and just from the way Sky have pushed tennis so far, that they want the stuff they are going to put up, they want to be good. Like, I don't think they would like the idea of, you know, however much your run-of-the-mill tennis fan would love the idea of having a single camera stream of, like, you know, the third court at Cluj. I think Sky Sports would hate that because they would think it's not, you know, it doesn't have the production values that they think is part of their brand. I think that, I don't know, George, that's kind of...
It's not though, James. It's not that's not going to be the main product. It's just something that would be very niche for certain people who want to watch it. The main television product is going to be always on centre court somewhere, and there's usually always one of the big names playing somewhere. This is for the niche people, the tennis fans. Are you going to go, okay, right? You know, if you want to go and watch like Court 2 at Dallas, then it's there on the red button, but we'll be on centre court at Marseille at that time.
I do wonder if there's someone who could come on and talk to us about the expenses of running all this through at some point, because I'd be genuinely interested, because I kind of agree with Calvin that the world feed to me for tennis feels like a very, very cheap way of quickly broadcasting lots of things quite easily. And I don't know how much it costs to set up a platform to, you know, I'm thinking about, could you just do a spin-off subscription for certain sports on Sky on an app or something where you pay £10 a month just for tennis, or £10 a month just for cricket, or, you know, buy a multi-pack of £15 for the two, that sort of thing, that aren't your kind of main sports. I don't know. I mean, there presumably there are smarter people who've thought about this much longer, and there will be clear business sense to do it. But from my understanding of things like the world feed, it's a very, very cheap thing to pick up. And there have been examples of rights of certain tennis events in the past where, you know, I've written stories kind of going after the BBC for not picking up what I was told was basically a £10,000 fee to play kind of high-level Fed Cup women's tennis and not broadcast it, which to me didn't sound like that was fitting in with their strategy of pushing women's sport forwards at the time. And I wrote pieces to that, and, you know, some people at the BBC got quite sensitive about that and felt that was an unfair criticism. But, you know, £10,000 to me in a broadcasting landscape sounds very cheap. And if you're trying to push that sort of narrative, then why wouldn't you pick that up? And similarly for Sky, I just don't quite get that there aren't better models out there to try and do it. And I agree with Calvin, actually, that it doesn't have to be your perfect flagship product. I can think of all sorts of streaming things I've been bloody paying 20 quid a year for. I think of DAZN in boxing, where I picked that up once to watch a fight that was on there, probably an Anthony Joshua one. I've ended up paying that for 6 months and watched it probably about 3 times. Yeah. Like, that feels quite an easy, quick win where you know you can provide a decent product of this will be on all the time, but won't attract you in. You know, that is the broad subscription model, full stop. So I am always slightly surprised that some of these bigger broadcasters aren't a bit more potentially creative, but that could just be my own lack of knowledge of how much it costs to set up and sort out.
But I think that what's also going on there is Sky is still primarily, well, look, Sky primarily are a broadband provider. Let's just be clear. That's why the channels exist. But they're also, you know, they don't come from streaming. Isn't there? They're not streaming first. You know, they might be sort of becoming more that, but it's not where they come from. Whereas obviously Amazon came at it from a different direction. And, you know, other broadcasters, I mean, we're going to see tennis on Netflix in a couple of weeks. I can't actually remember when that is or supposed to be, but no, it'll be later this year when because Nadal's injured. But, you know, that's something we're going to see more and more is streaming companies coming and broadcasting sport, and they will bring different ideas and a different approach. And hopefully, you know, we're always told that competition is a good thing, and I do broadly think that's true. The things will get better for the consumer. Whether they get cheaper, that doesn't seem to work. But they hopefully will get better.
Yeah, I mean, not to go too far out of tennis, but I've always been slightly surprised. Like the Premier League hasn't just like set up their own streaming service, done it in house, and kind of. I genuinely think for that, for example, if you ask me as an Aston Villa fan, would I pay £300 a year just to watch Aston Villa's matches that I can't attend because you only have like 2,000 to 6,000 away fans at a game? 100%. It's not even a question.
Yeah,
I would pay that. And
yeah, but they wouldn't do that though, because it's like they go on subscriptions and adverts, and I think that the money that Sky pay for it is just so much beyond what is sensible to even pay for. You see Sky just strangling all of their other products now. Like Sky Television isn't as good as it was 10 years ago because they've spent so much money on getting the football rights.
Yeah, it's true.
Anyway,
There's just less offering.
Maybe, but I don't know. I think some of these organisations have far bigger reach than we give credit for, and haven't just been brave enough to kind of take them on and do it. And I think one of the first ones that does it properly, certainly the Premier League, I'm shocked haven't actually tried to do it. That is just such a big beast of its own. I think they're probably just fearing the streams not working well enough, which is probably still the thing that worries people more than anything.
I mean, that is a problem.
Didn't add up well.
I know that. I mean, I get it a little bit in tennis. Like if a stream goes, then there's nothing you can do. And I know of some friends who may have illegal Sky Television. Who I don't, by the way. I actually pay for mine. So that's not.
Oh, no one was accusing you there, Calvin.
No, but I tell you
the
what,
lady doth protest so much.
I'll tell you why apart from I'm obviously a law abider, that the main reason why I do pay for it is specifically that, because I do want to watch Man United when they're on telly. Yeah. And I don't want to get to a situation where I've been at some of my mates' house before where you sat down to watch it and it just stops 15 minutes in and there's nothing you can do because you're basically reliant on the broadband. Whereas if you've got it on the TV, it's coming through the TV. It's not conking out.
Yeah. That I'm like that as well. It was when we bought our flat nearly 2 years ago. One of the first things I said was, I was like, look, it's going to cost an arm and a leg. I don't care. We're getting Sky TV. And I was like, well, we got Virgin in the end, but I didn't want to stream sport anymore. I want to just put the telly on, not be requiring bandwidth. And yeah, like your broadband definitely goes down more than your telly signal does, like 100% more often. I think our telly signal has gone once since we've lived here, and broadband goes down like at least once a month. I get a text from Virgin being like, there's an outage in your area, including today, in fact. So thanks, Virgin Media, for really helping me with my jet lag. There's a question from Human Not AI about surface changes, but we've kind of covered that a bit with Justin's question. So we might come back to it later in the year, but we'll move on for the moment. George, this is a good one for you. What are possible penalties for WTA/ATP players for complaining about tour or tournament? Have they ever been enforced? Asking as Danny Hadchikova, now appointed the infamous Madrid WTA director, criticised players for complaining and asked for penalties to be enforced. I have had a quick look at some of the tour handbooks on this, and I can't find anything specific. But there is, as there always is, the disrepute clause, which says that players must not do anything that might bring the game or the tournament into disrepute. And, presumably the tournaments could, in theory, make an argument that standing up and criticising a tournament would come under that, right, George?
They could, yeah. I think we're entering fairly interesting territory on this, James, given our various other Saudi Arabia chats. That could be quite a strong example where, and maybe I'm asking too much for a moral stance from a tennis player these days, but if someone were to turn up to a tournament and actually turn up to the press conferences and say, I'm here for the money, this place is complete crap, I don't agree with any of their values, and I think this is nonsense, on paper, that probably could be described as calling the sport into disrepute. But would that... I think that would bring quite an interesting moral tension there of someone actually maybe standing up and saying something that's right versus hitting that clause. To be honest, I think the majority of the time it's fairly lenient in terms of that clause. Like, I think you do have to do something quite bad. I think like Fognini's probably had that a few times when he called female umpires words he definitely shouldn't have been saying, that sort of thing. Even Zverev was quite borderline. That's why the investigation happened, but didn't really kick in, if you like. So I think the threshold is quite high. On paper, yeah, I don't see why tournaments couldn't do it. Is it worth pissing off a big star? Is it worth, creating some sort of mutiny amongst smaller stars if you start accusing them of things versus not? I don't think it's really in the tournament's interest to kind of try and pull what would be quite a small fine versus the huge tension and backlash they could get from the player body. So, yeah, on paper, yes, but it's a bold move to start invoking that clause, basically, I think.
And I also just think like it. I'm a bit, and I remember the Hanshikova comment, and I did think at the time, like, come on, mate, like, leave it out, like, do you really want to? And hell, if she's got the WTA job at Madrid, then she's going to have to deal with some criticism. You can guarantee that. And I mean, if she starts handing down fines, then I'd like to see Dani Hanchikova versus Victoria Azarenka in any sport or format, because that might get pretty ugly. I don't know, Calvin.
They've played before, haven't they?
Yeah, I suppose they probably have.
Yeah. Some crossover.
You ever been warned, Calvin, about your conduct at a tournament, maybe by a security guard chasing you down the street?
That was the only time, I think. But no, I mean, the thing I'd say to that is maybe the tournament should focus on making the tournaments a bit better, rather than I don't really like that stance of going like we're beyond criticism, which is basically what it's saying. I mean, I'll say this: most of the every ATP tournament that I've been to has been excellent. So I'd have no complaints about the tournament. So, I mean, ironically, I don't know, it's not ironic at all, but probably the strangest one. I did enjoy the tournament as a whole was Dallas last year, but it was pretty shabbily put together. Practice courts were in a marquee, where the roof was pretty low. You couldn't lob on them. But Henry says that they've changed them this year. So I guess they've heeded a bit of advice, and that's going to a different venue next year anyway. But most of the 250s I've been to have been really excellent tournaments. The flip side of that is tennis players are often a bit fragile, and they sometimes, if they've lost, they'll just start complaining about anything. Yeah. And one of those will be the tournament. But, again, with everything that we need to make sure we're better at in the game of tennis, I'm not sure that this is anywhere near the top of the priority list of making sure players don't. What's the worst case scenario if a player criticizes a tournament? Like, what happens on it?
Yeah,
they
don't play it next year.
Well, I was going to say, if anything, it probably brings more attention to the tournament, which will get people more interested to watch it. Like,
exactly.
I mean, they might want to criticise Saudi Arabia. They might find out they might end up with a body part down or something like that.
Quite.
Thanks,
Fab Miss Anna, for that question. Sorry for not name checking you first. Another question from Andy Lee, a regular correspondent on email. He simply typed in tennisunfiltered@gmail.com and reeled off some thoughts. He said some very nice things about the podcast, which I haven't copied across into my order of play. But I copied across the important bit, which is his question. He says, looking at the results from the Davis Cup this weekend, including a shock for Serbia and to a lesser extent Croatia, I noticed the finals group stages venues haven't been announced. I'm completely biased here, but do the panel think Manchester should be a permanent finals venue as per last year? Yes, there were attendance problems at, say, Switzerland versus Australia, but the GB games were bouncing. Fill the other games with schools and club tickets if necessary. We suffer from a lack of top-class tennis in the north. We have the Ilkley Challenger, and then it's down to Nottingham, Birmingham, pre-Wimbledon. This would fit the bill very nicely, in my opinion.
Yes, Birmingham in the north, by the way, James, just to push that out there as a strong Midlands backer.
Yes, no, I would agree with you. The north starts at Stoke-on-Trent.
I think it starts at Sheffield personally, but this feels like another bad tangent to go on.
Calvin, without wanting to spend too much time debating this, where does the north start?
The north of England?
Yeah.
The north starts at Chesterfield. I would say.
Now that is a good one, actually. And I've heard Mansfield has sometimes been moved.
They're about level, though, right? Maybe Mansfield's a little bit lower, I think.
Yeah.
No, I would say I always think that Chesterfield is kind of the top of the Midlands.
Okay.
But then Sheffield is very much the north, and Sheffield is like right next to Chesterfield.
Yeah,
as
and
well,
if you go to Sheffield, there is also the gut thing, right? Like, I think Stoke's in the north because I've been to Stoke.
I think Stoke's East Midlands still. I think that qualifies as that.
East Midlands. Jesus.
I think I'd keep
on the
Stoke
west,
in the
isn't it?
Midlands.
It's nearly in Cheshire.
Yeah,
I think you
below Manchester.
I think you need to have a look at a map.
No, you're right. You're right. You're right.
West
No, it's
Midlands,
definitely
I would almost tolerate.
It's borderline.
I'd struggle to see that. Like, well, Derby's definitely not the north. Like, Derby's the Midlands.
That is the Midlands.
So, and then Derby's not the north, and Sheffield definitely is the north. So then you've got to decide what Chesterfield and Mansfield are.
Yeah, it's definitely not a straight line, the border. It definitely wiggles.
I'd actually say that Stoke is Midlands, to be fair.
Agree.
Right, okay. Spend a bit more time in Stoke, you might disagree.
No.
Right, well, we've already got sidetracked from Andy's question, which is, should Manchester be a permanent venue for Davis Cup finals? For the record, this hasn't been announced, and I'm surprised it hasn't been yet. The I's have not been dotted and the T's haven't been crossed, but I am told by people who know that Manchester is virtually assured to be the Davis Cup finals venue for Great Britain in September, as it was last year. Calvin, you went to the venue in Manchester and spent too much money on food and drinks and spent too much time queuing. So that aside, is it the right thing to do to have that event in Manchester?
I mean, I think it's great for Manchester, and I think Manchester's a great city. My only concern is the ties that don't involve Great Britain. I think everything else is absolutely excellent there that they can do. They need to sort out the prices at the place, but don't think they're going to do that. But more importantly, they need to sort out. But again, this is a tennis issue. They need to sort out when people can come in and out of the actual stadium from the concourse. Yeah. That was a major problem, but I don't think it's like, as I've said before, I don't think that like it's in London where you could probably fill a small arena. Manchester's not a small arena. I'd say it's kind of a medium-sized arena overall. You can probably fill a small to, or not even, you don't even have to fill a medium-sized arena. You can get decent crowds in for pretty much any country in London because there's enough people. It's so multicultural. Manchester is quite multicultural. I just don't think there's loads of people from Australia and France who want to watch tennis on a Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, it's funny. Manchester is a multicultural place, but it's not full of people from tennis countries. I think there's not lots of Central and Northern Europeans there.
I think I think genuinely you will have this problem, whatever city you put it in there. Like I remember going to the first kind of Davis Cup finals that were all in Madrid, and you went out to those second or third courts that weren't from a country that was fairly nearby, to be honest. And it was a bit of a struggle. I guess maybe you had a few more kind of Latin American fans who might be coming as well. But I think that's just an issue with a format that would work best if it was a formal kind of World Cup where you were making a big thing out of it, being like, come over for a month, and like the Football World Cup, which obviously most sports can't do. But that is always going to be a slight tension. So, yeah, I mean, I can't remember who actually asked the question now, what their name was, but
Andy Lee.
Andy Lee, sorry, Andy.
Not the boxing coach.
Not the boxing coach. I actually think Andy's suggestions of schools and that sort of thing are probably the right sort of tactic to take to kind of fill those things up. Do school kids really care if it's not Great Britain playing? Will they want to go and watch some tennis and find it a bit fun? Could you give them, if it's Australia, some big yellow and green whackers or whatever? I don't know. Like it feels. Again, this probably comes back to...
Honestly, George, they're just not in maths. Like that's the... Is Switzerland, Australia better than maths?
Yeah.
Yes.
And again, I think this probably all boils down to what's the cost versus actual putting this thing on. But I just struggle to believe it's that difficult to kind of pick these events and get schools involved and put them in there or whatever.
Look, I mean, I don't necessarily, it always looks good for the stadium when they fill the stands with kids, but it's like it's not something like that I'm a big fan of because it just gets a bit crazy. I mean, I saw it at Australia one of the days. One of the courts that I was watching on, they basically must have given a load of tickets to the local kids, and like, you know, I don't want to sound like a grumpus. I am going to sound like a grumpus when I say it, but it was
Never
just
sounded like that before.
But it was just like a bit mental, you know. And it's like I'd rather see, you know, it's professional sport that we're talking about. I'd rather see it be, you know, actually get people in the crowds who want to see it. The fact remains that apart from about 4 cities worldwide, if you're not going to put, if you're not going to have home and away ties, you're not going to fill the stands.
I think probably my slight counterpoint to that, which I appreciate what you're saying there, is that does tennis need to make the long-term investments of just shoving kids in front of this quite early? And
I don't know if it makes it. I don't know if it helps though, George. That's the thing. I don't know how many people stick to it.
It's always hard to quantify, isn't it? But
yeah.
like, you know, I think there's something about, you know, I have childhood experiences of going to football the first time. My parents weren't into football at all, and I kind of went as a 6-year-old, and then me and my brother got into it. That sort of thing. You know, I think there is something about going and experiencing it that can kind of bring it about. And if you take your whole school there, are your classmates talking about it? Are they suddenly like, oh God, he was cool, wasn't he? And can we go try and watch and talk about it?
Have you seen his Instagram? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we should watch his next match. How? No idea.
Does he have more Instagram followers than Rihanna?
No, George. We don't have time for that fight today. We don't have time for it.
We do. It only takes about 5 seconds.
It's just maths.
Gets knocked down every time.
On a sort of broader note, tennis in the north. I mean, there's a couple of places I was thinking today, because obviously we were in Manchester last year, but, you know, there's not a lot of high-level tennis in the north for whatever reason, whereas in the south you have a lot more. I mean, Newcastle, I know, is a place that the LTA would love to take a big event at some point. Leeds as well. You know, it's a pretty big city and with a pretty, you know, there's a good tennis culture in Leeds, right?
There is, and Leeds actually has a perfectly sized arena. It's a pretty small arena to watch tennis. Now, it's a bit... Now, you could put the stands at both sides. The thing is, Leeds is a concert arena. It's kind of a half arena.
Right.
The stage is like the seats are at... I'm on video and most people are just listening, but the stage is just facing. There isn't seats all the way around like there is in many arenas, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But it's relatively small. I think it's about 9,000 people. It can fit in there, so it's a good size for a sport that doesn't have loads of fans like tennis. I mean, Sheffield Arena is also excellent. The benefit that Manchester Arena has is that it's so accessible because the train station is in the arena. Whereas Sheffield Arena is even out of the centre. Leeds Arena's in the centre at least.
Right.
Sheffield Arena is a good taxi ride out of the arena, out of the centre. Sorry, and it's not great. There's not loads of parking around there and stuff. It's a bit tricky. But yeah, I mean, I'd certainly think it could be explored other places to watch in the north. But yeah. I do think Manchester put an excellent event on, and it's great that it's bang in the centre. That's the thing that you can go. Yeah. Like I said last year, I went round, had a little walk around the centre in the middle of the day because I'd just been watching tennis at the US Open for 2 weeks. So,
yeah, it is right. You know, right next to Printworks and right next to Northern Quarter and all the cool bits of Manchester. Not that I would suggest Printworks is cool, but it's fun. Anyway, not to get sidetracked by nights out in Manchester. Right, well, that's all the questions that we're going to have time for this week. I know there are more. Thank you very much. Keep sending them in. I will always try and get to them whenever we can. But there's an awful lot of tennis news that we've got to get through as well, partly by virtue of being a little bit later this week. I think we're going to start with Andy Murray, who is, to use his words, not in a very good moment. Which is one of those things that's like it's somehow come from football.
Mourinho and Co.
Yeah, like Spanish-speaking, particularly football managers, and I'm sure it's a sort of direct translation of "not in a good moment," and then Murray himself used it. The specific context for which is that he is now lost his last 5 matches, I think. In fact, 6 if you go back as far as the Swiss indoors, but he's gone out first round of his last 5 tournaments. I know it's the worst run of his career by some distance. His latest defeat was to Thomas Mahatch, at the Open 13, as it's called. 7-5, 6-4. It was Benoit pair the week before, as we mentioned. Murray was on Twitter, as he sometimes is, and often quite illuminatingly. This week he was having a big old bite back at Keradine Idasan, who's the Scottish BBC reporter and who has reported on Murray's career, pretty much all of it, in fact, who had written something about Murray's recent struggles. Andy said on Twitter, "Tarnishing my legacy, do me a favour. I'm in a terrible moment right now, I'll give you that. Most people would quit and give up in my situation right now. But I'm not most people, and my mind works differently. I won't quit. I'll keep fighting and working to produce the performances I know I'm capable of." There's a lot to unpack there. Who wants to go first?
Well, I mean, look, tarnishing legacy is always a bit of a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, no one's going to look back on Andy Murray's career and purely think, God, he was just trudging around doing nothing. I mean, he's got the obvious hand of having had a major surgery that no other singles player has come back from. So everything in some ways is a bonus. But, people won't forget the Olympic golds, the Wimbledon end of hurt, even the tears kind of before ending that Wimbledon hurt. So, I can totally understand that side of thing. That said, if you're judging his career in the last 9 months, it's hard not to feel really frustrated. And I think, we've gone back to that Tsitsipas match multiple times before where it felt he was very competitive against a guy who's top 10 in the world and has been for the last 5 years. And it was a match it felt he probably should have won. And since then, it's just all felt a bit disastrous, really. There's been some shocking losses to Dimonor, who was playing him in the kind of back end of last year. And I just kind of sense that there's a combination of the aura being completely gone. And I'm not saying it wasn't gone before, but I've seen Andy Murray get into matches over the last 2 years since coming back where players have looked a little bit nervous towards the end. They've thought, this guy's not going away. This is Andy Murray. He always sticks in there. He's going to make me win this match. To a guy who actually looks incredibly fragile getting towards the finish line and now looks, dare I say, slightly uninvested on court and slightly, resigned to his own fate. And things can turn around pretty quickly. I mean, we're talking about one of the blokes he lost to last week, having not won a fucking match for 18 months before that. So, you can flick things around in a second, but it's hard to make a positive case for Murray at the minute. And we sort of said last week, is this the end? Will he give up? He's biting back a little bit now, but he does need that match where he gets a win by hook or by crook. And it's not looking like that's coming at the moment, unfortunately. But fingers crossed next week, these words will be very out of date and he thrashes someone he shouldn't. 6-love, and we're all back on the Murray hype train or something.
Calvin, there's a seat waiting for you on the Murray hype train.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack on it. I'd say this about legacy, right? That it's a weird one, and I actually have my own theory about legacy. That I call it my Mike Tyson theory with sports stars, because unless you do, I mean, he actually did something terrible, but that's beyond the point. But unless you do something absolutely terrible outside of the sport, your legacy is largely protected by what you did at your prime. So I call it Mike Tyson theory because I have a good friend of mine who loves sport, who bizarrely and ridiculously claims that the current version of Mike Tyson would knock out Anthony Joshua if they fought each other. And it's my theory because I keep having to remind him that Mike Tyson, for about 65-70% of his career, was quite rubbish. Like, he was just like, I think he lost like 5 of his last 7 fights or something. But all we ever remember is the bit when Mike Tyson was brilliant. Before he went to prison, when he was dominant, when he was young. No one ever remembers the last at least 50% of his career. And there's other cases like this. There's footballers as well. Like the classic example of the footballer is Andy Cole. Well, let me tell you something at the minute. Andy Cole, I think, is still the 3rd highest goal scorer in Premier League history. But after he left Man United, this is Andy Cole's career. Blackburn, Fulham, Manchester City, Portsmouth, Birmingham, Sunderland, Burnley, Nottingham Forest. Does anyone remember any of those him playing for any of those clubs?
I weirdly remember him playing for Blackburn alongside Dwight York, where they scored quite a few goals in a random match. But
no one remembers it. They remember
not for reasons of him doing well. Like I remember him at Man City.
No one went, oh, he just spoiled his legacy. He ruined his legacy. No one remembers it. Andy Murray could play for another 3 years and not win a tennis match. And 6 months after he retired, no one will talk about that. Everyone will just think his career ended probably in 2016 when he was world number one. So there's no damage. There's no damage to legacy, that type of thing. I'll say this as well. I don't know Andy overly well. I know him a little bit, and I know people around him. I think it was a bit harsh him having a go at that journalist who wrote that, because from the sports media in particular, he's enjoyed almost, and rightfully so, he's enjoyed almost universal praise throughout his career. There's been some nonsense in some of the gutter papers not in the sports pages about his in the media about him, which is just crap. But from just the sports media in that type of thing, like I say, he's enjoyed exclusive praise, rightfully so as well. So I think it's a bit much for him to come out and start having a go at the sports media, because people have got a right. People have got to have their opinions. They've got to put their opinions out. I don't agree that it would ruin his legacy, not at all. But people have their right to think, what they think. I don't see what the harm is if he keeps playing. He loves playing tennis. He loves competing. What's wrong with that? Who's it harming? If he goes, he's not taking wild cards. He's in there on merit. Even if he does take a wild card, I'll always tune in to watch him play.
It's always interesting.
Yeah. I suppose the one, I know, for example, Dicko wrote a column last year, criticising his behaviour in Paris which was sort of felt like the lowest zenith, and it was ugly, like when he was smashing rackets and just swearing and shouting, and that side of Murray, which he's kind of always had that in him,
always,
like that anger,
always.
But when it was just him turning up, losing in straight sets and mouthing off a lot, like I don't want that. But I agree. I think, and someone said, in fact, on Andy Roddick's new podcast, which I'm hesitant to plug because they've knocked us a spot down in the UK podcast charts.
Funny that he's got a bit of a name, doesn't he? I suppose,
yeah, who knew winning a US Open and getting to world number one would be so good for your podcast?
Come on, Calvin, you need to up your game, mate.
Yeah, Calvin, dust off the shoes, get the racket out. But yeah, he was sort of, and him and Paul Wertheim,
John.
I went to school with Paul Wertheim, John Wertheim, were making the comparison with Venus Williams, who frankly plays about 2 tennis matches a year, always takes a wild card, but her court is always full. And people still tune in to watch. Is she ruining her legacy? Of course she's not. So I think the legacy question, I don't think it's unreasonable to talk about it. Like, if Andy wants to come on and tell us we're idiots for talking about it, he's more than welcome. Because that's the kind of level of guest we need now with Roddick in the game. But I don't think it is. How on earth does he turn it round? I guess that's the real question. Like, because the goal must be to turn it round. It's not going to be a fun summer if he loses first round at Roland Garros and then loses first round at Surbiton. Oh, not Surbiton. Well, yeah, it could be Surbiton. Who knows?
I think it's one of those. If he was like younger and he's just in bad form now, you'd say probably just needs a little bit of luck, churn a couple of wins out, and he's been in winning position. He should have beat Pet. I mean, Mahak, to be fair, is a bit of a nightmare opponent for him, because Mahak is
good indoors as well.
Yeah, he's very good. He's young, so he doesn't have the scar tissue of being dicked around by Murray on a tennis court that a lot of them have. Although ironically, there's no one who's got more scar tissue from being battered around tennis court than Benoit Paire. And,
that is the most unfathomable loss, isn't it?
But Mahak's like, I don't read much into that, because I thought Mahak would beat him. Because he's just very good. He's young, and he's the profile of player. He's a ball striker who doesn't miss very much. And against this current version of Andy Murray, you'd think that Mahak is going to get enough mid-court balls to tee off on to win the tennis match. I've said for a while that I think if Murray is, however long he's going to continue, if he's going to be relatively successful for that period, I think he needs to get a lot of draws against a certain type of player who matches up well to him. and he's got to avoid the type of player who I don't really see as a route to beating.
George, similar thoughts?
Yeah, I have to say I'm not overly convinced he is going to turn it around from here. I think I'm not saying I don't think he's going to win another match again, but I'd be quite surprised if we're talking about Murray in maybe even quarterfinals of any tournament this year. I think it will be a pretty bleak year for him, and probably one that does kind of end it. I think. What do we see as the ultimate good outcome for him now? Like a third round run at Wimbledon to kind of say goodbye? I mean, that genuinely is kind of what I view as the ceiling for him at the minute, where he has a couple of humdingers, maybe takes out, actually Australia was kind of a draw I saw that might have fit into that narrative. It was a very low seed first round who felt pretty beatable on paper, and it's a very potential chance at playing someone like Gael Monfils second round and then lose to Novak Djokovic. I mean, that feels about as good as it's going to be for Murray in any of the big events that, the wider public are going to really tune into. I don't know. I'm concerned. I don't think at this age there's going to be some glorious turnaround where it all suddenly clicks into gear. There'll be moments that can be enjoyable. I think Monfils is probably a pretty good example of this, as someone who has probably been playing losing, maybe, I don't want to put a figure on it, but feels like he's been losing 75% of his matches for the last 2 years. And then he occasionally has one small run where you're like, oh God, wasn't Monfils fun? It's great to see him still kicking around. But really, otherwise you see him in a draw and you think, yeah, he'll probably go out first, second round max. As Calvin says, Murray does love tennis. He's going to enjoy it, but it doesn't look like he's enjoying it that much at the minute. It feels a bit, this will be a new feeling for him, losing this many matches, and it can be a hard slump to get out of. So yeah, I'm not overly positive at the minute, which is a shame, because after the Tsitsipas match last year, I was thinking, God, he looks quite fit. God, he can push someone quite hard. Why not?
Yeah, quite. George, on the note of Andy Murray, I've had a specific request to stop you doing any more Andy Murray impersonations. I'm sorry, Mary, for George's cringing noises. I'm not going to stop him. You can't stop George Bellshaw doing anything. But anyway.
And you only get one negative comment and 1,000 private enjoyments, I'm sure.
Yes, the George Bellshaw Andy Murray impersonation fan club is going
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.